The early spring of 2025 brought a chill to more than just the Canadian air. British Columbia, known for its stunning landscapes, suddenly found itself at the epicenter of a North American trade tremor. The provincial government announced significant tolls targeting U.S. commercial vehicles journeying through its territory to reach Alaska. The message was clear: access would now come at a considerable price. The Alaska Highway, a critical artery for goods and people moving between the contiguous United States and Alaska, was set to become a symbol of discord. The proposed legislation was crafted to be ready, a weapon in waiting. The details painted a picture of serious intent. The tolls were designed to be substantial, a financial barrier that would force American businesses and travelers to reckon with the new reality. The province of British Columbia was drawing a line in the snow. It was a direct response to pressures from south of the border. Supply chains would be disrupted, and costs would rise. For those reliant on the land route to Alaska, the announcement was a stark awakening. The ease of transit, once taken for granted, was suddenly under threat. The government of British Columbia was signaling that it would not passively accept what it viewed as unfair trade practices. It was prepared to use its geographical leverage. The message resonated far beyond the trucking industry. It spoke of a changing dynamic, where even the closest of allies could find themselves locked in a bitter economic standoff. The northern barricade was being erected piece by legislative piece. The implications were immediately apparent. A new chapter of economic friction was about to be written. The catalyst for British Columbia's unprecedented action was not a mystery. It lay squarely in the aggressive trade rhetoric and policies championed by former U.S. President Donald Trump. In early March 2025, Trump threatened sweeping 25% tariffs on a wide array of Canadian goods. This was a familiar echo of his America First doctrine. These tariffs were perceived by Canada as a direct economic assault. Industries crucial to the Canadian economy, such as lumber and dairy, felt particularly vulnerable. The Trump administration's rationale was to rectify perceived trade imbalances and protect American jobs. Yet, to many Canadians, it felt like a punitive measure from their largest trading partner. The specter of these tariffs created an immediate sense of crisis within Canada. Businesses braced for impact. Political leaders scrambled for a response. The Trump administration's approach left little room for negotiation. This aggressive stance forced Canada into a defensive posture. The environment of economic hostility set the stage for British Columbia's dramatic decision to implement tolls on the Alaska-bound routes. The timeline of this burgeoning trade dispute was remarkably compressed. Events unfolded with a speed that left many observers breathless. It began in early March 2025. Reports solidified that Trump was moving forward with threats of substantial tariffs on Canadian goods. This was the spark. The Canadian government and business sectors immediately went on high alert. By March 6, David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, announced his government's firm intention to counter the American measures. The chosen weapon was a toll on U.S. commerce transiting through his province en route to Alaska. This was a clear, direct, and targeted retaliation. By March 7, news outlets reported that Premier Eby was not just talking, he was acting. Legislation for the proposed tolls was being drafted. By March 17, British Columbia had formally introduced the toll measure. The mechanism was being put in place, ready to be activated. The speed was dizzying. This rapid sequence highlighted the precariousness of the situation. The swiftness of British Columbia's response indicated a province unwilling to be a passive recipient of damaging trade policies. Several key figures stood at the heart of this escalating trade drama. Dominating the initial provocation was former U.S. President Donald Trump. His renewed push for tariffs on Canadian goods was the undeniable trigger. Responding directly to Trump's actions was David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia. Eby emerged as a determined defender of his province's economic interests. Overseeing the national response from Canada was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Trudeau publicly criticized Trump's tariffs, labeling them a very dumb thing to do. Trudeau emphasized that Canada's ultimate goal was the removal of all tariffs. These three personalities, Trump, Eby, and Trudeau, formed the central triangle of this dispute. Their interactions and policy decisions were the engine driving this particular episode of North American trade tension. One of the most striking aspects of the unfolding trade dispute was the uncharacteristic silence from former President Donald Trump in the immediate aftermath of British Columbia's toll announcement. This was a man renowned for his rapid-fire responses. When British Columbia threw down the gauntlet, many expected a swift and fiery condemnation. Yet for a period the anticipated outburst did not materialize. This quietude was noted by media commentators and political analysts. Why the silence? Several theories emerged. Perhaps the move by British Columbia caught him off guard. Another possibility was that Trump recognized the potential for this specific issue to escalate in ways that might not be entirely beneficial to his narrative. The silence itself became a talking point, a vacuum that invited speculation. The decision by British Columbia to impose tolls on routes to Alaska carried significant potential economic consequences. The Alaska Highway remains a vital land bridge for certain types of commerce and for many individuals. The prospect of substantial new tolls threatened to squeeze this lifeline, increasing costs for businesses and consumers in Alaska. The flow of goods, from construction materials to everyday supplies, faced disruption and added expense. Trucking companies anticipated higher operational costs which would inevitably be passed down the supply chain. For Alaskan businesses already contending with higher logistical expenses, these new tolls represented another unwelcome financial burden. Economists began to predict a potential decrease in trade volume along this route. British Columbia framed the tolls as a way to recoup financial losses anticipated from the U.S. tariffs. This perspective did little to alleviate the concerns of Alaskans who felt caught in the crossfire. Smaller enterprises and independent truckers faced increased travel expenses and potential delays. The situation highlighted the interconnectedness of the North American economy. The announcement of British Columbia's toll plan sent immediate political tremors across both Canada and the United States. North of the border, there was significant support for Premier David Eby's assertive stance. The Canadian federal government, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, publicly backed British Columbia's decision. This unified front suggested a national resolve not to be bullied by its larger neighbor. Public opinion in Canada generally leaned in favor of the retaliatory tolls. South of the border, the reaction from U.S. officials was one of strong disapproval. Representatives from the current U.S. administration called the proposed tolls an unnecessary escalation of trade tensions. The political climate in both countries was already marked by increasing protectionist sentiments. The dispute over the Alaska Highway tolls became a significant political flashpoint. While the proposed tolls on the Alaska Highway represented a novel form of retaliation, trade friction between the United States and Canada is not a new phenomenon. The two nations share a deeply intertwined economic relationship, but this proximity has also bred periods of disagreement. Issues surrounding key commodities like lumber and dairy have frequently surfaced. The softwood lumber dispute, for instance, has been a recurring point of contention for decades. Similarly, Canada's supply management system for dairy has long been a target for U.S. trade negotiators. The approach taken by the Trump administration marked a departure from more traditional, rules-based dispute resolution mechanisms. British Columbia's direct action was a response born out of this new, harsher climate. The political atmosphere in both nations had seen a rise in economic nationalism. The Alaska Highway toll incident was a symptom of these broader trends. As of late May 2025, the situation surrounding British Columbia's proposed tolls on U.S. traffic to Alaska remained fraught with uncertainty. The legislation for the tolls had been introduced, but it was designed not for immediate implementation. This created a tense standoff, a waiting game where the next move could either escalate or de-escalate the crisis. The potential for further escalation was palpable. If the tolls were implemented, the United States might consider its own countermeasures. Alternatively, the threat of the tolls could bring both sides to the negotiating table. The long-term implications for U.S.-Canada relations were a significant concern. Trust, once eroded, is difficult to rebuild. The incident served as a stark reminder that even the closest allies are not immune to serious disagreements. The path forward for U.S.-Canada trade was likely to remain complex and unpredictable.